There's a lot to talk about. So the Express has been having a really interesting week. They've been having an interesting month, really. They've been under a lot of scrutiny for their reporting. As we've been highlighting on this show, they're being accused of bias and saying that the reporters work for the PNM. Well, they hit back this week in an article called When Bloggers Attack by Denise Wren. It chronicles the back and forth between the paper and their critics, which plays off online. Now, two of the subjects of that story were interviewed by C News' Rishi Harinanan, and not unexpectedly, they weren't too pleased about the article.
News contacted Alan Karim, who also denied he is being paid.
I wish somebody could tell me what they collect my $6,000. I would love to have that. That's absolutely nonsense.
Now, and the other subject is Marcia Braveboy, a journalist at 91.1 FM. She maintained that she never posted anything about Express columnist Suniti Miraj and her deceased husband. But of course, that does not mean that she didn't post anything about Suniti at all. But to those specific allegations, Braveboy said that somebody else posted it.
Usually when they have documents of proof, they post it, they print it, they publish it. She never published that post. She only saying that she have it, and readers are supposed to believe it because it's the Express. And that is not true. The Express tells lies on people.
Ms. Braveboy said at least 90% of the quotes in the article misrepresented her views.
So we invited both Braveboy and Karim on the show, but they declined. And just for the record, Denise Wren will be putting out a part 2 of her story where she will talk about the PNM's online commentators. But after that story came out, Minister of Tourism Gerald Hadid came out in praise of Braveboy and wrote on her Facebook wall saying, quote, "Keep the faith, Marcia, you have more credibility than all of them at the Express. They were bought out for a few PNM pennies." So anyway, since we like to give everyone a fair chance to respond to their comments, here's what Minister Hadid had to say about his Facebook post.
Well, I don't have to tell you that. If you read the amount of stories that was put out over the last 2 years, it's not balanced. The stories are simply not balanced. You can have stories, but you must get a fair balance on the comments from other people.
Any specific examples?
Well, I have plenty, but I don't have them with me. I've done a lot of research, and I know what I'm talking about. I'll give that information at another time. No.
So we're looking forward to what that research uncovers. But then we also posed the question to Communications Minister Vasant Bharat about what he, or if the government agrees with what he says. Well, he essentially left him out on his own.
I've not had the opportunity to speak with Minister Hadid on the matter, but as I said, as far as I am concerned, I have no such information. Those are views that are Minister Hadid's.
So you're saying he's speaking on behalf of himself and not the government?
In that particular respect.
But hey, at least Dr. Ramachan likes the Express.
Mr. Speaker, in the Trinidad Express, very credible newspaper, Mr. Speaker. They tell it as it is.
I'm being told that may be sarcasm, but I'm not sure. But moving on, so the opposition leader, or PNM political leader, Dr. Keith Rowley, has announced that he will sue a few radio stations and a few radio announcers who commented on the rape allegations made by Tobago East MP Vanilla Allen Toppin.
I instructed my lawyers to file suit against 91.1 and Wendell Eversley, against Morgan Job and 102, against Gladiator and 91.9. And my lawyers, in the next few days, will be examining the publications and writings of Philip Alexander, and they already have instructions that if they find that I have been slandered, to sue Philip Alexander.
Now, both Philip Alexander and Ricardo Gladiator Welch have come forward and said that they're not fazed by this. But what do you think about it? Now, is it within Dr. Rowley's right to finally lash back on some of these attacks that may have been coming out against him in the media? Or is it an attack on the press, as others have said? Now, of course, this goes between your political divide, how you feel about it. But we want to know how you feel. So tweet to us, the hashtag in conclusion, and let us know what you think. But here's the reason why he's suing. Of course, remember, it stems from the comments made by Vanilla Allen Toppin in the Parliament. The PNM stayed just long enough before walking out of part 2 of the motion of no confidence to hear her apologize for her statements.
Was and is never my intention to stigmatize any person whatsoever who may have suffered the indignity of domestic violence of any kind.
Alan Toppin took a hard stance with the media, though.
In consequent reports in the media, my contribution was unfortunately characterized and exploited as an attack on persons who may have been victims of domestic violence and other such offenses.
Yes, we in the media apologize because we clearly misinterpreted what you said when we asked you to explain yourself, and you clearly told us what it is that you meant when we asked you.
No comment.
Oh, we haven't asked you a question as yet?
I know, no comment. No, not at all. I need to get in. No comment. That's my position. No comment. No comment.
So you've not spoken to her?
No comment.
Do you want to give another apology by chance?
No comment.
No comment? So that's your apology?
No comment.
Yeah, I have no comment on that either. All right, let's take a break. But before we leave, here's your 8 o'clock news headline. Remember, it's satire. Welcome back. So the bond between journalist and a source is sacred. We trust them to give us the information, and they trust us to keep them safe, and more importantly, keep them secret. But throughout the world, journalists come under attacks from officials who demand that they reveal their sources, and sometimes it heads all the way to the courts.
A Colorado court is trying to force Winter to testify on her reporting of that shooting investigation. If she's asked to reveal her sources and she doesn't, she could be facing jail time.
And of course, sometimes even end up in jail.
A lawyer for the radio show host in Burundi, who was detained last month after he refused to identify a guest who said he had been involved in the murder of 3 Italian nuns, says his client was freed on bail on Wednesday. The detention of Bob Rugurika, director of Radio Publique Africaine, or RPA, drew attention to media freedom in the East African country.
Of course, we at home aren't immune from this. You might remember when the Newsday's Andres Bagu's office was raided by police in an attempt to reveal his source for a series of stories on the Integrity Commission. And now NGC, we've been talking about this story quite a lot in the show too, is seeking to bring Asha Javid before the court to, 1, stop her from publishing stories about them, and 2, to reveal her source. So to talk about this, we have the chief editor of the Business Guardian, Anthony Wilson, and attorney at law, Justin Phelps. Good evening to both of you. So let's start with you, Justin. From a legal perspective, what might this case look like? How will this play out in the courts?
Well, the case is alleging, from what I've read in the Express report, that there's been a breach of confidence. That is a cause of action open to someone. The question becomes whether this is material that is in the nature of confidential material according to law.
Right. And publishing that is illegal.
Well, it's not illegal. It's a breach of the right to have your confidential material not bandied about publicly.
Right.
One of the observations that an observer would make immediately is that no one is alleging it appears that the information is false, which is presumably why there's no straightforward defamation action, in which there wouldn't be no need for the revealing of the source. The next question is whether the information is in the nature of confidential information. The categories of information that the law recognizes as confidential are not closed. But what you could extract is the question from the case is the question as to how would the Trinidad and Tobago courts develop the law of confidence. It is certainly unique that a public body is claiming that the
state-owned, on top of that,
state-owned body is claiming that the information is confidential. If there is going to be a widening of the categories of confidential information to sustain this action, you're going to have it develop in accordance with public policy.
Right.
And public policy in Trinidad and Tobago can be, or one indicator is the United Nations Convention Against Corruption and the International Convention on Civil and Political Rights, which expressly preserve a free and independent media, and therefore the right to protect your sources, and advocate for whistleblower protection.
So let's get Anthony in this. So Anthony, from a journalistic perspective, you would have read the article. What was your immediate gut reaction when you heard about it?
When I heard about
the NGC's plan to haul Asher before the courts?
My gut reaction actually was, what an absurd thing for a very large state-owned company to attempt. In my view, it is absurd for the National Gas Company of Trinidad and Tobago, 100% state-owned, a company with revenues of $20 billion, $6.5 billion of profits in 2013, to attempt to get the source of Asher Javid's information.
Has this ever been done to this extent, to have a journalist through the courts reveal their source?
Whether it's been done in Trinidad and Tobago, I'm not sure. As your opening clip indicated, it's been done all over the world.
Right.
But where?
Yeah, so really, there's no way that Asher or anybody at TV6, the management, the editorial management of TV6 is going to give up the source of that information.
Now, if she doesn't...
she might have to go to jail, in which case...
And that was the next question.
In which case, I'll bring the soap and the toothpaste.
But Justin, from a legal perspective, what does... If, let's hope it doesn't go to jail, but what does that look like? How much jail time does one serve for, I'm guessing it's contempt?
If you permit me, let's go into reverse for a moment. It is a fundamental and well-established rule in the law of defamation that the law of defamation would not make a journalist reveal a source. So that commonly referred to as the newspaper rule. So that deals with that. We're jumping a bit because you're assuming that this is a meritorious action.
Right, so they may not even get that far.
It is novel, but novel is a euphemism that doesn't necessarily equate with meritorious. Where internationally is the space in Trinidad and Tobago in 2015 to develop the breach of confidence law so that you compel a journalist to reveal a source? And that's not the most sinister part of this. From the extracts that I have read, the purpose of calling upon the newspaper to reveal the source is so that disciplinary, meaning punitive action, could be taken against someone who's disclosed public money transaction information, and that raises two questions. First, it raises your freedom and independence of your media. And second, it raises the question as to persons who are in a whistleblower situation being victimized because they've disclosed information from a public body. Now, neither of those things, it appears to me, bearing in mind our international obligations, can be accommodated in modern-day democratic society.
But all this information should be public anyway, right, Anthony? We should, I mean, this is a state-owned company. This is public information. So what's the issue here?
Well, I think we need to be mindful of what was the basis of Asher's story. From where I sit, the basis of the story was the very sharp increase in expenditure by the Corporate Communications Department of NGC. No, so it seems to me that that is an issue that is simply not subject to confidentiality.
Right.
In other words, the amount of money that is spent by NGC, whether to buy an asset or to find natural gas, or to fund constituencies and all-inclusive parties and so on, is a subject for public discourse, public disclosure. And I think it is really absurd for NGC to bring this confidentiality gambit in an attempt, of course, to muzzle the journalist.
And we're very short on time, but let me just ask this. So while this plays through the court, will she be allowed to publish anything else on the issue? So let's say this is played out in the court and it's dragging on. Will she be allowed to report during this time?
I don't think it's going to go to court, because if it goes to court, the absurdity of NGC's position will be exposed. And I think NGC is a company, it's a local company, but it has international links and reach.
Right.
And I would believe that some of NGC's international partners, Mitsubishi, all of the energy companies that operate here, and others, would be slightly taken aback by this heavy-handed approach to a journalist seeking information in the national interest.
Right. Justin, I'm going to give you the last word on this.
The actual type of material under discussion is referred to in the International Convention Against Corruption, and that is public accounting for public funds. So I think Mr. Wilson is right that the moment the question is commended to the court as to whether public money transaction information should be confidential, the answer is likely to be no.
And just be tossed out. So
yes.
I think judges will be laughing in the Hall of Justice, ridiculing this action by NGC.
But the result could cause international embarrassment for us.
That's the point.
2015, to have a journalist being forced to reveal a source so that you can punish the source is going to be an international embarrassment. It is inconsistent with our international obligations. And the free media are the persons, it would be bizarre for an observer to think that you could have articles of impeachment against a president of the United States because of a source that remained anonymous.
Right. So we're going to leave it there, gentlemen. Thank you very much. But we have Anthony Wilson's going to stick around. We're talking covering energy in an energy country, which somehow journalists don't seem to do very well. We'll be right back. This is In Conclusion.
Did you know that according to PAHO, the presence of heart disease in Trinidad and Tobago is double that of North America?
All right, welcome back. So on Wednesday, Royal Dutch Shell agreed to buy the BG Group for $70 billion. It's the fourth largest energy merger, and everyone around the world is talking about it, but except us really here in Trinidad. Now it's being covered, but it's not really a top story, and though it should be. But here's Roger Dwarka from CNews. He had a look at the local impact of this.
Shell has really consolidated its interest. As a matter of fact, now that I come to think of it, I think this is going to make them the largest shareholder in all 4 Atlantic trains.
Some commentators say this is part of a defensive merger, since the oil price has fallen by some 50%, and analysts are warning investments in North Sea oil exploration has all but dried up. One industry expert who's worked closely in the energy ministry when the ExxonMobil and BP Amoco deal occurred thinks there will be asset loss.
So there's going to be shedding, and you know, people are not sure whether they're going to be the ones. So really, it's uncertain days on the whole for the petroleum industry, I think. Yeah?
So, this is something that we have to discuss. For some reason, a country that's run on the energy sector doesn't really have journalists who understand and I'm not taking myself out of this, don't have journalists who understand the energy sector. So, Anthony Wilson, the chief editor of the Business Guardian, stuck around, and he wrote a piece on Thursday in the Business Guardian to talk about his predictions about what the impact might be. He's also one of the few journalists who actively covers energy in the country. So thanks for sticking around. So Anthony, what's the first thing that one, the public, and two, the journalists covering the story need to know about this merger?
The first thing I think is that there may be an impact on the country's revenues. And here's how I got to that conclusion. As David Rennick said in the piece before, and as I said in my own column, Shell is likely to be, if the acquisition goes through, the largest shareholder in trains 2, 3 and 4
of Atlantic,
and 46% of Train 1. It would be the largest shareholder overall of Atlantic. And therefore, that puts it in a position to negotiate a harder deal with the government and with NGC than British Gas might have done had it stayed around.
Right.
And that has potential. That potentially could lead to revenue situations down the road. One of the things that's coming up in the next 2 or 3 years or so is that both British Gas and BP are going to renegotiate their long-term gas supply contracts with the National Gas Company of Trinidad and Tobago. And therefore, that means that for many years, BP was the largest player in Trinidad and Tobago. If this transaction goes through, Shell is going to be the largest player. And therefore, that gives Shell the ability to negotiate much tougher terms than BP or BG, right. British Gas.
But at the end of the day, this show, we're talking about the media. So we in the media need to learn how to break this down. So what do? You just break it down to the lowest common denominator. How does this affect you, and how does this affect jobs? Is that how we should be covering it, or is there another way that we really need to get across, hey, this is a big deal?
Kejan, I don't believe in dumbing down things to the lowest common denominator, because if one does that, one tends to lose other people who would think that, you're condescending to me to...
Right, so you're saying don't write these stories for everybody, but don't also eliminate the niche market.
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
So how do we strike that balance, and how do we as journalists actually be able to write to that level of the niche market? What kind of training? How do you even begin to start?
I wouldn't say the niche market, but I also wouldn't say the lowest common denominator. I think there is a place in the middle where both the newspapers and the public will be quite happy.
Right.
Right. I think, to answer your question directly, it comes from a position of understanding what's happening in the international scenario and in the local scenario. And I think it's only if you understand what is happening are you going to be able to explain what is happening.
And why is it that we as journalists aren't being pushed to understand energy the same way we're pushed? No matter what you like, you always end up covering politics, or you might cover a murder, but you could go years and never cover an energy story. Why is that in Trinidad, where energy is how the country makes its money?
Yeah, it's a significant irony. I think energy is difficult. It involves difficult concepts. It involves a lot of explanation of terms and concepts. And it may be that journalists don't always have the patience and the long-term thinking to grasp the concepts and to understand the concepts and the terms and the jargon.
But to our detriment, really. But you as an editor, is this something that you push for in your newsroom? And is this something that all editors should start pushing for in their newsrooms? Because I'm guessing now that the next few months are going to be very interesting in terms of this this merger.
Yes.
Energy sector in general.
Yes. I would say, yes, editors need to push for more energy understanding and therefore more energy analysis and energy reporting.
And how practical is that in our newsroom? Is it that you have to send a journalist off to a course or something like that? Or?
A course would be helpful, but I think what is very important is that the journalists must have an intrinsic interest in the subject. Mm-hmm. I think if the interest in the subject is not there, the journalist is not going to be drawn to continue learning on the subject, of the subject, about the subject.
we do this all for the public. Are we cheating the public by not covering this and getting as in-depth and explaining the importance of what's happening in the energy sector to them?
Yes, we are cheating the public. I think there is some ray of hope. David Rennick does an excellent job.
I can name them. You,
Curtis
David
Williams.
Rennick, and Curtis Williams. Three.
Right.
Three in a nation of how many media houses?
Yeah.
Three?
Yeah, it's not enough. It's not enough. Maybe there is something there for the NGC to be looking at.
And they don't like journalists right
Instead of coming after journalists
teach them.
And seeking to get their sources, maybe the NGC should be partnering with journalists to help them develop their understanding of the energy sector.
That's a great concept. Do you think it will actually happen? So what would you understand this? Can I start coming to you for classes? Should young journalists start coming to you for classes?
I think young journalists at The Guardian, whether journalists from outside the Guardian Media Limited can come to me, I don't know.
Well, you came to us, we can come to you. All right, all right, let's take a quick break. We're going to wrap after this. Thanks a lot to Anthony for coming in and discussing this. This is In Conclusion. All right, and that's our show. I want to thank our guests, Anthony Wilson and Justin Phelps, for coming. Remember, reruns of this show, In Conclusion, are at 9 a.m. on Tuesdays. We have a new MAT president. I just don't know who it is because we haven't actually we recorded before the voting took place. But next week we'll talk to them, and maybe we'll have them on the show. So that's it for our show. Remember, tomorrow at 7:30 is my colleague Jabari Fraser's show, A Current Affair. A brand new week of news begins right now.